Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Super Paranormal Chronicles. Today, I am more than delighted to have somebody that I've been following for a long, long time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I'm not a stalker. I mean in a good way with his work. Dr. Ciarán O'Keeffe, who is an English psychologist specialising in parapsychology and forensic psychology. Ciarán, welcome.
Good evening, Lee, or good day, or whatever time of day it is for you. But good evening it is for me. As you can tell, it's quite dark in the background. But yes, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, and I know that I started this podcast back in February, and I thought to myself, I want to get as many, and I'm gonna be really modest now, as many big people as I can onto the podcast. And because I know you from your first TV days, it's like I'm going to reach out to Ciarán O'Keeffe and see if he responds. Now, Ciarán, how long did it take?
It took over a year, I think, in the
I
end,
think,
wasn't it?
yeah, I think. Well, I think it
Was it
was.
longer than that?
No, I think it was a little bit short. I think it was like December, January time when I actually reached out to you, and I got a response on a Friday evening in June. It was like,
Oh, that's not too bad. That's six. That's
no,
about 6 months. Not too bad. My usual record is over a year. So yes, you're doing well.
oh, I feel honoured. Okay, so Ciarán, you've been involved with you know, the investigating and parapsychology for a long time. So, can we go back to your very first experience and how you decided that you were going to like channel your career into searching the paranormal?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's two separate things there because you talk about a first experience. My first ever ghost hunt was about the age of 6, living in a street in uh, just outside of Norwich in Norfolk, kind of the eastern area of England. And there was a rumour that there was a ghost in a burnt out pig farm at the bottom of our street. And a bunch of us 6-year-olds got together bravely one evening and convinced our parents to let us stay out a few hours later, and we traipsed down to this burnt out pig farm hoping to catch a ghost, and were standing round kind of the entrance to the pig farm, not necessarily wanting to go in, and a few of us threw stones in thinking that we would disrupt the ghost in some way, and hit a wasp's nest. And the only thing we captured that night was a lot of wasp stings as we ran back to our homes crying. So that was my first experience ghost hunting. But the seeds of interest were there even at that age. Even though that was kind of my first ghost hunt, I was fascinated by ghost stories at a young age. I was a voracious reader of M.R. James, H.P. Lovecraft, a lot of the classics, as well as contemporary authors like James Herbert, Stephen King, Clive Barker. And that was even at that age, like 8, 9 years old. My parents were genuinely worried about my reading habits, the stuff I was reading, but I was just fascinated by this. And then at the same time, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World was on. Kind of, he had this series on English TV, and I was enthralled by that. But actually, 1984 was the pivotal moment for me because that's when I saw the movie Ghostbusters, and everything else was an interest, and I was fascinated by ghosts. 1984, even though that was a movie, that was me kind of hearing almost parapsychology, the word, for the first time, and it led me on an investigation to find out more about parapsychology and find out what was going on. And I even called up Columbia University, which was featured in the movie, to ask them about their parapsychology unit, which of course they didn't have one. So the lady at the end of the phone wasn't too happy. But she mentioned about the Institute of Parapsychology in North Carolina, where parapsychology started about 100 years ago. And I investigated that, and I asked for advice about what I should do to be a parapsychologist. I carried on doing ghost hunting through my teen years, and I ended up going to university in the States and doing a parapsychology thesis at the Institute of Parapsychology, supervised by them. So that's kind of, a brief summary of my journey, but it also, you can see how it answers two parts to your question. What were the early experiences, but then what led me on this journey, kind of parapsychology. So I think that hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned some of your reading material, because I used to be a big fan of some of the books you've mentioned, and it's interesting because you mentioned James Herbert, I believe,
Mm,
and the rats and those kind of books absolutely fascinated me,
yeah.
and I think that was kind of my first kind of insight into stuff that was outside of the norm, if you like. But as a kid, I always used to be fascinated with Borley Rectory.
Mm,
So, I was born in the 60s, living in Lincolnshire, and Borley Rectory was always, whenever I saw a book on it, I'd always read up on it. And it wasn't until I wrote a small paper for a course I was doing last year, I think it was, that I read and found out that not all of it was as true as what is put in most books, and I was
mm,
absolutely heartbroken. Like
yeah.
this has been a place that I've worshipped for as long as I can remember, and then to find out that some of the reports were fake, and like I was gutted, absolutely gutted
Yeah. I
with
know what you
regard
mean.
to that.
Here is the most haunted house in England, which is is the kind of title that's given to it by many people, but also the title given to it by Harry Price, the investigator of Borley Rectory. And so,
Exactly,
yeah, it's huge in terms of it being on such a high pedestal to be known as the most haunted house in England. And of course, unfortunately, it doesn't exist now. It was, burnt down many, many decades ago. But still, yeah, you read about the case as a young boy, and often the coverage of it paints this picture of a fascinating case that has got so much phenomena happening to it, and just, one of the best cases. And yet, yeah, when you start to dig into it a lot more, and there's been a few recent publications actually over the last 3 to 4 years that have gone into it in great depth, you find out actually a lot of it is kind of self-publicizing on the part of Harry Price. A little bit of exaggeration here and there in terms of him trying to, make it more than it was, but also some key characters involved in that case, or, residents of the case as well, who may have fabricated some of the evidence as well. So it's unfortunate. I still think you and I should not be too despondent and too upset about the case, because it still is a fascinating case. And if anything, it almost
exactly.
typifies a lot of the great cases that we can deal with. That there's this huge, huge mythology and kind of amazing reputation around them. But some of them, when you get into the other layers, you find a little bit of ambiguity, or maybe a little bit of questionable facts that are thrown in. And I think that, yeah, think for that reason, Borley Rectory for me still is fascinating, and still is fascinating because it kind of illustrates the frustration, if not the fascination and enthusiasm that we have for ghost hunting.
That's right, and I think you can say the same for the Enfield Poltergeist as well. There's been movies about it, documentaries about it, and if you dig deep into that as well, there's a few doubtful experiences or occurrences that are not exactly true to the written story.
Yes, but also I think what's interesting about the Enfield Poltergeist, there you've got a case from 1976 that was just over a year, poltergeist case in North London. And like you said, we've got Conjuring 2, which was said to be based, based on a true story of the Warrens' involvement. I'm sure there are Warren fans out there in North America, no matter where you turn. And it painted the picture that they were the key investigators in the Enfield Poltergeist case, which of course they
Yeah,
weren't. It was Guy Lyon Playfair and Maurice Grosse, who were employed by the Society for Psychical Research. But regardless of that, you've got that movie, you've got a number of documentaries, like you said, some BBC, is it BBC dramatization as well, various kind of representations of it. And again, you're absolutely right. It kind of paints that picture as here is an amazing case, but when you look at some of the hidden layers, it makes you start to question, what's going on in terms of the facts. But also, I think there's a lot of not necessarily created publicity around it by those involved at the time. But there is just a lot of publicity that's been created about it because I think it captured the imagination of people. When the internet really blew up, you had a lot more discussion about it and footage and audio footage from it on YouTube and various other platforms. And I think that kind of had a snowball effect to create a poltergeist case that was seen as the most amazing one. And yet you only need to look, a little bit to find poltergeist cases that are bigger and better and more phenomena and more witnesses, and stuff that feels more evidential. You only need to look very, very briefly to find that. But for some reason, Enfield Poltergeist kind of captured the imagination, and has this, again, it's on that high pedestal like Borley.
And it's interesting because the most latest Enfield Poltergeist TV series, a 3-parter, was actually shown over here in Canada a couple of months ago. So it was like, oh, yeah, must put it on record, and watched it. And because it, like you say, it's an iconic story.
Yeah.
It's an iconic, like blast from the past, so to speak. And when I was in the UK, I used to work in London as a paramedic, and I was based in Barnet. And I used to go to Enfield and places around that all the time. But it wasn't till after I left that I found out about the Enfield Poltergeist. So, yeah, the chances of me driving down that street are quite high.
Yeah.
And it's always weird how you find out about this kind of stuff afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's similar to kind of my journey. If I look at some of the places that I stayed in as part of my journey, there were aspects of it that I only found out later. A prime example would be, so you talked about Enfield. Prime example for me would be when I studied in America, my undergraduate degree, where I did the parapsychology thesis, and I lived in a town called Chestertown in Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay, about 45 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. But for a significant part of that degree, I was working down at the Institute of Parapsychology in North Carolina, in Durham. Unbeknownst to me, Chestertown was where the inventor of the Ouija board lived over 100 years ago. And it was in Chestertown that he came up with the idea for the Ouija board as we know and love it today. For the first 2.5 years of me living in Chester, I had no idea that was the case. And I don't know what it is. It's just one of those things, isn't it? You don't tend to look on your doorstep for weird and wonderful things that you're fascinated by. And it was just pure luck that I found out about 2.5 years, after I'd started living there. So yeah, similar experience to your Enfield one.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you say that, and it's kind of like a mind blown experience. It's sort of like, oh my god, I did not know that, and and then you make the effort to go and to find out more about it and go and visit the location or whatever.
Yes, I don't make that mistake now though. I made that mistake when I was in Chestertown. Now, everywhere I've been in the last 30 years, that's pretty much what I do the first month, is do a lot of research locally just to make sure I'm not missing some, lovely occurrences and some lovely cases that might be sitting right on my doorstep.
Well, it's funny you say that because a week on Tuesday, the wife and I are going on vacation and we're going to Fiji. So I've been sort of like Googling most haunted places in Fiji, and seeing how local we are to where we're staying to hopefully to go and not necessarily investigate, but to go and see these places and talk to the locals and stuff like that.
Brilliant.
But once you get it in your blood, it never leaves. You may take a back step or a back seat every now and then, but it always comes back, and you've always got that interest, and you've always, as soon as something new comes up or there's a new site, there's a new location, you always jump at that chance to go and investigate or to get some more research. Do you find exactly the same?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think I've tired of ghost hunting, but also hearing about ghost stories for my entire career, from even those early days of visiting that pig farm and reading James Herbert and reading those early books. Even from that, I have not tired of it. And yeah, anywhere I go, similar to your Fiji excursion coming up, anywhere I go, I'll be on the lookout for potential haunted locations, but I'll also be contacting local ghost groups as well to find out about any ghost hunts going on, or if they've got any tips or stories that I should be hearing of. And you're right that it's kind of ghost hunting and fascination with ghosts is in the blood in some way. Um, and I guess it is, on reflection, it is something that's very true for me, because I'm a parapsychologist, but of course I'm a well-known skeptic as well. And so people find it strange that I would reach out to local ghost hunters or local ghost groups. But, you know, over the past 10 years of growing reputation in England, and ghost hunters are kind of getting it now, that I'm as fascinated by ghosts as they are. You know, that
Yeah,
passion, that embedded passion that we've got for ghost hunting and for investigating stories and hearing of people's ghost stories has always been there. And just because I have a slightly different perspective, it doesn't mean that I'm arrogant enough to dismiss what they do and how they do it. You know, we've all got a similar sort of passion and enthusiasm for it, just slightly different ways of going about it. And I don't think that's wrong. And I just think, you know, I love, like I said, I love hearing the stories and I love hearing about the ghost hunts.
exactly. And that was one of the thing that I know one of the first TV shows that you was on was Most Haunted, and the fact that you would blatantly go, well, this could be A, B, C, and D, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be of a paranormal nature. And I've always kind of taken that on board, and the fact that, you know, I've looked into the EMF can produce hallucinations, and black mold can produce hallucinations. Back in the day when you first started doing things like Most Haunted, that kind of information wasn't readily available like it is now.
Mm.
And there's so many different groups that are coming out into the open now. People didn't used to talk about it, but now if you go into a bar like I do, and if I'm wearing a t-shirt, people ask what it is. Oh, I've had an experience once, and then they go into telling you the experience. And
Yeah.
there's more reality now occurring where people are understanding that it's not necessarily going to be of a paranormal nature. There could be a rational explanation for what's happening, and that that's a benefit to yourself being doing what you do, and other groups that are genuine looking for a natural phenomena rather than something of a paranormal nature.
Yes, but it's also interesting you hear that, because, or you say that, because in the UK, the number of groups that are looking for, you know, natural phenomena, I can count on one hand. As in natural phenomena as opposed to supernatural phenomena.
Yeah,
You know, where their sole motivation is looking for the natural phenomena. That's on one hand. But there's also many groups who are there to ghost hunt and to find evidence of ghosts. But they have, like you say, that awareness of the alternative, the natural explanations as well. And so they are looking for things like black mold, or they're looking for things like infrasound or EMF, etc., to help explain these experiences. But you also get the other end of the spectrum of people that are just not interested in the natural explanations at all. You know,
exactly.
and to an extent, I don't mind that. But let's talk about it in terms of belief and perspectives. You've got cynicism all the way to dogmatism. So often people think of me as being a skeptic, and they think that I'm a cynic, which means that I'm closed-minded to the possibility, and I don't want to hear anything, about ghosts. I'm not cynical. I'm skeptical, which is kind of the middle point. Skeptical means open-minded but questioning. And of course, I'm fully aware of all the natural explanations. If I go to the other end, you've got dogmatism, which is an extreme level of belief that's almost the same as cynicism. It's closed-minded. It's not listening to alternatives. So I have a problem that end. I don't have a problem with people that believe in ghosts at all, especially based on their own personal experiences. But I also don't have a problem if people continue to believe in ghosts and believe in ghostly evidence if they're presented with my argument for some of the natural explanations, but they choose to go, yes, it's interesting, but I still think what happened to me was real and it was a ghost. At least they've listened rather than just ignored and dismissed it. I don't mind that sort of conversation, and I think that sort of conversation is quite healthy, actually.
Yeah, and a few years ago when we first created SEPA, I was talking to a friend of mine, told him what we were doing and how we were going about it, and he went, "Oh, that's complete BS." And I went, "Well, what do you mean it's complete?" He goes, "Well, it's all rubbish." And I went, "Oh, so obviously you've got some evidence to prove that." And I called him out on it. And he went, well, no, it's just my personal belief. And I said, well, what we do, we will, if we get invited to a property, we will do all the normal checks. If they've got noises in the attic, we'll check for rodents and, like you say, EMF and black mold and stuff like that. And it says it's not until we've absolutely run out of natural phenomena like issues that then we kind of put the other hat on and have a little bit more fun, and then we will go to see if we can actually communicate. So we do all the normal stuff first and say, oh yeah, okay, unfortunately you've got large EMF in this area, we can't really move forward until you get that rectified, then we'll come back and we'll continue the investigation.
Yeah.
And once I'd explained to him about that, his attitude completely changed and went, oh, okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
And then he was more interested about how we're doing it.
I think you're absolutely right. A simple way that I put it to people is I say, look, there are natural and supernatural explanations for people's experiences when they're reporting ghosts. I have a list of natural explanations. People report and I hear that what they're saying. I'll go through my natural list and I'll tick them off or I'll cross them out. I go, well, it's not that one, it's not that one, it's not that one, if I am able to. Once I've discounted all of those, at the bottom of the list is supernatural explanation. And I think what you're proposing and what you do as a group is a very good way of doing it. It's that discounting all of these natural explanations and then leaving a supernatural one at the end, with the caveat, which of course you will find and have found in the past with your investigations, the caveat being it is not always easy to discount or find the natural explanation because the moment has gone. When people are having an experience, you're not often there. They're reporting it after the fact. And it's difficult to go back and measure a lot of what might have been going on at that particular point in history.
That's right. And a perfect example is back in June, the three of us went to a lovely little hotel just over the border in the US. And it's got a history of like ghost stories and this kind of stuff. And we rented the most most highly active rooms in the hotel, and we're setting cameras up, and there's a cabinet with a TV on, and the door creaks open. Of course, we haven't got any cameras set up at this time, but this door creaks open, and it's got a wooden latch on it. So we're all looking at each other and going, "That door just creaked open." But rather than go, "Oh my god, it's a ghost," oh yeah, let's check that box. We then put the latch back and we was banging on the table, we was stamping on the floor, banging the sides of it, and we was doing everything we possibly could to make that cupboard door open, and we could not replicate that cupboard door opening, no matter how close to the latch we'd put it. And we were back, and we stopped what we were doing, and for like half an hour, we're trying everything we possibly could to get this cupboard door to open, and we could not do it.
Yeah, but then that's what I was saying earlier. There's the frustrating part of ghost hunting, and then there's the same part of ghost hunting, which is the reason why we continue to do it. The fascinating part.
Exactly.
And that's a prime example of the frustrating part. And the most frustrating part for me and for you is not having it recorded. So not being able to replicate exactly. I mean, you did your best. You're not able to replicate exactly what happened, but also the evidence now is anecdotal evidence that's reported by you and the group. So that's the frustrating part. But then that is not unusual in ghost hunting. You know, especially with poltergeist cases, this idea that phenomena can happen when it's least expected, but can also often happen when you are not paying attention. And that's what I find really interesting about ghost hunting and, you know, cases generally.
Yeah. So let's go into some of your more confusing or unexplainable experiences. So are there any that stick in your mind all the time that if somebody asks you this question, you can go, okay, yeah, there's this when that happened and I can't explain it? Do you have those kind of stories?
Yeah, I have. I call them head-scratching moments, which frustrates the hell out of my wife because she says, no, forget it. You've got to say that it was a ghost. And I say, well, no, it's a head-scratching moment because I can't explain it. A couple of classic ones. A haunted nightclub in northwest of England, kind of Liverpool area, and had investigated it with a group for about 6 months, so once or twice a week for 6 months. And all of the phenomena associated with the place started when a group of staff sat down and did a seance after the club had closed. So late one night, they'd have cleaned everything up and they did a seance. They did the seance. They said the atmosphere changed. Fire exit doors opened of their own accord. Saw a shadow walk behind the bar. Objects move over the course of several days following the seance. So kind of a definite change. They called in the local ghost group, and I was based at the university in Liverpool. And after a few months, that group called me in to investigate with them. Fascinating case. The nightclub, when we started investigating, had officially closed. It was being sold off for redevelopment, and somebody else was buying it, and it's now, I think, a gym. But after about 6 months, the staff, all of the staff that were in that original seance, happened to be in that property on one particular night, purely by chance. At no point had we had the whole group together. Five of them. We hadn't had all 5 of them together. So 2 of them were part of the investigation that particular night, and 3 of them had been passing by and seen the lights on, knocked on the door, and they came in. They said that they would happily do the seance again, just to kind of replicate it so we could see where they're all sat and everything. And they weren't scared by it because we asked them, we were concerned about kind of the ethics of it. And they said, no, it's fine. We know this place is closed. We're not coming back here again, so it's not a problem. What they did was do the seance, and I was filming using a thermal imaging camera. And I always set it to black and white rather than the color that you see on a lot of TV shows. Set it to black and white so that if there's a drop in temperature, it shows up in green. And you can immediately see that relative drop in temperature. So I was filming them in black and white, not for a TV show, but for a record of the event. After about 20-30 minutes, a couple of them went, well, nothing's happening. We don't feel like, there's anything here, and we don't feel, like we're in contact with anything. So we'll stop. And I said, well, don't stop, because it's a rare occurrence that you're all together. Give it maybe another 10-15 minutes. If nothing happens, we'll just call it a night. What I didn't tell them was that on the thermal imaging camera, what I saw was almost like a green fog kind of approaching from the side of the room towards the seance table, which indicates a drop in temperature. And sure enough, after a few minutes, they said, "Oh, it feels like there's something here with us." And they were doing some glass work on the table, which I'm not a fan of, but they were getting very excited by what was happening. And they reported a definite atmosphere change for them. And of course, what was happening is this green fog had approached the seance table and it had almost kind of enveloped the table and the people sat around it and just sat there for about 30 minutes whilst they were making all this contact. And then one of them sat at the table, said, "It feels like whatever was here is now going away." And right before she had said that, this green fog just removed itself from the table in the group and started to travel along the floor back out of the room. Like a weird fog. And what's fascinating about it is you get people's experiences interpreting it. So you get the subjective experience of people going, "Weird atmosphere, there's something here with us." And you get a tangible, objective measurement that there is a drop in temperature. Yet no windows had been opened inadvertently, no doors had been opened. There was no reason why there should have been a drop in temperature, and certainly not one that gave the appearance of almost like a fog traveling at floor level towards them. So that for me is a wonderful head scratching moment. The moment has gone. Can't go back into that property and replicate what happened and find out what happened. So yeah, that was a definite head scratching moment. Really odd. Really odd.
That is, yeah. And like you say, the fact that you cannot explain it, and with you having the background that you have, for someone like you to experience that, it's like sort of like, no, I just can't. I just can't.
Yeah.
And I think people actually enjoy having you say that because of your background, because of the your academic background and stuff like that. That if you can't explain something, it's got to be something. Let's be just right, really cool and sort of like outstanding for them to be involved with that.
Well, I'm very grateful you say that. I think, and it's wonderful if people are thinking that. I think in a way it's kind of overestimating the fact that I am just human and people have experiences no matter what. Yes, I'm an experienced parapsychologist with 40 plus years now and ghost hunting 40 plus years. So I have all that experience and all that knowledge. But by the same token, people always ask me, what is the best evidence that we can get on a ghost hunt? And the example I gave you is lovely because it's objective and it's subjective. You've got the thermal imaging footage plus the people's experience. But I always say, you know what? The best evidence you can get for a ghostly experience is your own. 100%. It's your own, often subjective experience. Because let's not forget, when we investigate properties, we are investigating those properties largely because somebody has visited it or lived in it or worked in it as a security guard or a cleaner or something and reported an experience. But what they were doing was probably not ghost hunting. They were doing anything but ghost hunting, and they had a natural experience. So for people to go into those properties and have a similar sort of experience, that for me is the best evidence. You can give me loads of photos and EVPs and film footage, and yes, it's impressive, but you can still always question it. And I love it. Don't get me wrong. There are some photos that I love and some EVPs that I love and videos that I do love. Don't get me wrong. But I just think in terms of the best evidence, when people ask me, what is the best evidence? I always say it's your own, and there's nothing you can do to necessarily convince me that it is a real ghost experience. You have to be convinced yourself. And so all I'm going to do is offer an alternative explanation to make you think about the alternative explanation. If you then feel that no, your experience was genuine and it was a ghostly experience, then fine. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
I respect that.
that's it. And one of my favourite experiences that I had, the place that we went to last night, we was there maybe 18 months ago, and I was doing just a solo walk around in an area of cells that's called the Hell's Angel Wing. and I'm doing my normal thing. I've got my body camera, I've got my audio, and I've got my other camera with me, and I'm just asking, the normal questions that everybody asks. If there's anybody here, please make a sign, make a sound, and I'd very much appreciate that. And I did not hear it at the time, but on review on the audio, I heard a double breath straight after I said I would appreciate that. Now, I've got a friend who is very knowledgeable with audio, and he's got his own podcast, but he does that kind of field for his work. I sent it to him to say, I would like to know, if possible, what this was. And he even broke it down to voice waves and said, this is your voice wave, the double breath is this. And as you can see, there's two different kind of levels. He went, so definitely it wasn't you. And the closest person apart from me was maybe 40 to 60 feet away. But it was a double breath that I heard on the audio. And it's like, that's gold for me.
Yeah, amazing.
Because it's something that I experienced it, but I cannot explain it. I did not hear it at the time. But to have a professional in the audio world break it down to the bare bones, so to speak, and to say, this was your voice, this was the voice, and it was two completely different like wavelengths. It was like,
Brilliant.
Okay, I'm not going to say it's a ghost. I'm going to put it to the unexplained pile, the head-scratching pile.
The head-scratching pile, yes.
Yeah.
But it's lovely to have that. But it's also lovely to have that kind of, external expertise you can call upon. But I don't think everybody has that ability. But also kudos to you for inviting that external expertise. I think too often what I do see with some amateur ghost hunters is attempts to analyze stuff like that themselves. I don't mind it, at a cursory kind of superficial level. But if you're getting to the point of thinking that audio footage is something paranormal, then why not get that expertise in just to double check? Or if a photograph you think is a ghost, or a film is of a ghost, whatever it is, then get in the experts. It's the same thing that I talk about with infrasound. I work with some amazing people, and have done in the past, who are expert acoustic engineers and acousticians generally, who, yes, I have amazing and full knowledge of infrasound, and it's one of the things I absolutely love talking about. But my background is not acoustics. So I will always defer to the experts, in terms of how you measure it or whether it's present or that sort of thing. And I think there needs to be a lot more of that, to either develop your own expertise or to recognize that we don't necessarily have that, or we reach a point of not knowing, so we need to call in experts.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that location is we went there about 3 months later, so this was last year, exactly the same room. This time I'd got my two friends with me. One was sat maybe 30 feet away from me. The second one was maybe halfway between us both, and he was talking, and you can hear the talking on the audio. And we were with another group that were doing something else in the building, and I also got my three recording devices. I walked out into the corridor. You can see the camera pan down the corridor, so you know that nobody's there. My colleague is still talking, and as I walk back into the room, I kind of hear like a wah. But I didn't hear it at the time. Again, this was on review. So as soon as I heard that on the audio, I went to my body camera for the exact same time. It was on the body camera, and for my other video camera, it was on that as well. And again, I sent it to the same guy, and he come back and went, you've got another good catch in exactly the same building, exactly the same room. So there's something happening in there, but you can't explain it. And again, it was another personal experience, but two experiences that I never heard at the time, but you only hear it in review. And that's why reviewing your evidence is so important.
But also it's fascinating to hear about a case in a location that you have uncovered that has given you repeatable phenomena as well.
Yeah.
Because I think that's always a little bit of the holy grail, is finding phenomena that is repeatable. You hear about it in some particular locations, and I've investigated some amazing locations worldwide myself where you hear about this repeatable phenomena, but even the repeatable phenomena is not every single time you visit. It might be once every couple of months or once a year even, but it's happened over a century, that sort of thing. But to get a situation where you visited it twice and you captured a similar sort of EVP it's fascinating.
Yeah. And like I say, that makes this hobby, job, whichever makes it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because you are getting the unexplained evidence that you've analysed, you've had tested, and you cannot explain what it is.
Exactly.
So one thing that after doing the stalking bit with regard to you to just find out a bit about the background, I did come across the School of Parapsychology.
Oh yeah.
And I noticed that there's a few courses that you teach, and I noticed that you had one on demonology.
Mm.
So where did your interest in demonology come about?
That's a very good question. So I've always been fascinated by it. I was brought up in an Irish Roman Catholic family and surrounded by discussions of kind of religious parapsychological phenomena, stigmata, levitation, xenoglossy, which is speaking a language of which you've got no prior knowledge, but also demonic possession and exorcism. Never been in a situation as a boy witnessing any of this stuff, but there's mention of it in the book and discussion about it. So that was kind of a little bit of a fascination there. But the reality in terms of really being interested in demonology hit home about 20, 25 years ago when I started to realize that in North America, there were more and more individuals who were calling themselves demonologists and going into haunted properties and saying that the haunting experiences or the haunting phenomena was caused by demons. And this is about 25 years ago. I'm sure the listeners will be thinking, it's really kicked off in the last 5 or so years, which it has to a huge extent on TV shows where, we know certain groups, certain individuals will say that a haunting experience is down to a demon, and every single haunting experience is. So I was very conscious of this, but I was very conscious, that is not demonology. Demonology in my world, and I say my world, my academic and scientific world, means something totally different. It doesn't mean somebody that dresses in black, although I'm wearing black now, so it doesn't political. But it doesn't mean somebody that dresses up in black and carrying a silver crucifix, and declaring everything as being demonic. Demonic. That isn't it. Not demonology. Demonology is kind of it's an academic endeavor. It's understanding demons. It's understanding the hierarchy of demons. It's understanding how demons are discussed, throughout history, but also individuals who claim that they are possessed by demons. There could be alternative explanations for, but also you look at any number of different cultures historically, and they will have different ways of interpreting demons. But also you've got a discipline there that looks at demons and demonology from a medical perspective, from a sociological perspective, cultural perspective, psychological perspective, community perspective, you name it. It's almost like the development of a natural phenomena rather than a supernatural phenomena. But we have that term now, and it's been, if anything, it's a term that has been exacerbated and exaggerated by religion more than anything else, and now it appears that a lot of ghost hunters are adopting it. So it's one of those topics that I'm fascinated by, and one of the fringe areas that I study is and teach about on the School of Parapsychology is religious parapsychology, demonology, demonic possession, exorcism. Fascinated by it, but also incredibly skeptical about it. I know, and I've done extensive research, especially around demonic possession. So that's kind of where it comes from, and that's my approach.
Yeah, because I know a good example of not doing it the correct way is the Anneliese Michel
Oh yes,
case,
yeah,
where she died of malnutrition, and I think the parents and the priest were actually convicted of negligence in the end.
yeah,
So that kind of puts it into perspective that not everything is what it seems.
yes,
And for
exactly,
anybody that wants to go into that field, that should be a perfect starting point. That case
yeah.
for Annalise to say, this is what went wrong, and this was not proven to be demonic. It was just bad actions and practices by the parents and the clergy.
Yes, and coincidentally, we're talking about the same period when the Enfield Poltergeist happened. 1976 was when Anneliese Michel unfortunately died as a result of malnutrition and 60 plus exorcisms that were conducted,
Yeah,
over the course of however many, a couple of years, but quite extreme intervention. But also, let's not forget that in that situation, you also get a lot of support for the idea that she was demonically possessed from her family, but also herself. She had a very strong belief in this. So it wasn't just, that nobody had a belief in it and these priests came along. There was a definite belief that was happening. But yeah, fascinating case. If anybody is interested in demonic possession, do look at the Anneliese Michel case. It was around 1975, 76, maybe a few years before then when it all started. But that was Germany. And yeah, fascinating case. There is actually a Hollywood movie that was done, a version of it, which is The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which
yeah,
is
that was
a
based
movie
on this.
directed, I think
Yeah,
written by, but directed by Scott Derrickson, who has done a couple of possession movies. But he took the Anneliese Michel case and transposed it into America, so changed it to an American thing. But actually, it's quite a good representation of the case in terms of the ethics and kind of um, the extreme intervention, which was very harmful at the time.
yeah. Because when I decided that I was going to really dig deep into the paranormal and I started doing the investigations, I decided that I was going to try and boost my knowledge level. So I do similar courses to what you have. There was ghosts and poltergeists, and one of them was actually an introduction into demonology. Because you can't talk about the paranormal and not include demonology, even though a lot of it is misconstrued into something that it's not.
Mm,
And it was interesting to say that the guy that was teaching was, if the Roman Catholic Church take on some priests as trained exorcists, one of the first courses they teach them is mental health issues.
mm,
Because back in the day when we didn't have all this technology and this knowledge, people with mental health could have been misdiagnosed as being like possessed.
mm. Yeah.
And the fact that the Catholic Church are teaching priests about mental health issues first before they go into anything else, I think that kind of proves a little bit of a point, so to speak, that
It
you've got to look at the natural things before you look at the unnatural.
it does. It does. But I tell you, students on my course, so I run a course, Deliver Us from Evil, course on exorcism and possession, very quickly realise that even though that is a strength with some of the training that happens in the Catholic faith, and there are other faiths that do that to teach them about mental health, it's also one of the weaknesses. And the reason why is because yes, mental health may be responsible, mental health issues might be responsible for outward appearing symptoms that are misinterpreted as demonic possession, but certainly not by priests now who have that training. But yes, mental health may be responsible for it a lot. But I always say psychology, psychiatry, and neurology, we need to have full knowledge of those things. So not just the
100%.
psychiatric, which is the mental health issues, but there's a huge psychological issue, which is not around mental health, but it's around things like suggestion. It's around things like belief in attentional blindness, loads of psychological concepts that are nothing to do with mental health, psychiatry to do with mental health, but then also neurology that a psychiatrist wouldn't necessarily know and a psychologist wouldn't know,
Yeah.
that there are things that can happen in the brain that are not about mental health, but are about things going wrong, with your neurology. And priests don't know about it. Skeptics don't know about it. People don't know about it. So I mention that because there's a gap there of knowledge that even the most
Yeah.
ethical priest that has been trained on mental health issues, but also identifies a case who then he takes to the bishop, to get that extra level of scrutiny, or to take to a GP or doctor or take to a psychiatrist. They're only tapping into one area of expertise. In an ideal world, it's almost like a triage. In an ideal world, you would be taking them to a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a neurologist for a check first before you make that decision to do an exorcism.
Yeah. And having a paramedic background, yes, there were a lot of psychiatric cases that I've been to and I've seen, and the way that the brain works, we don't know half of it. Even something like anesthesia, they're not quite sure how it works. They just know that it does work. And it's a short term, and it's like, really? Yeah. I'm going for an operation on a broken leg. Oh yeah, we're going to put you under for an hour. Okay, let's just hope that I come back out the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
And and it's funny that that we talk about demonology and stuff, because if people get a scratch, they automatically assume that it's a malevolent spirit, that somebody or something is out there attacking them. But what I enjoy telling people, I try not to be smug about it, but sometimes you can't help. Whereas if I'm going to be talking to you and you've got your back to me and I'm not of this realm, so to speak, and I call out Cairan, you can't necessarily hear me. So I'm going to shout louder. You still may not hear me. So the next natural human action is for me to reach out and tap you on the arm, tap you on the shoulder to get your attention. And I try to tell people that that could be the action of an innocent, let's go there, an innocent spirit, an innocent apparition is trying to get your attention by touching you. And that transference of energy could be what's caused the scratch. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a malevolent entity that's out to get you, so to speak.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of interpreting it, and it very much ties into some of the papers that I've written over the last 5-6 years, arguing that if the phenomena is real, the phenomena is real universally, but there's a different way of labeling it. So you're talking about scratches, and one person might interpret the scratch as being an aggressive act. Your interpretation, which is a lovely one, is that no, actually, it might not be that. It might be that they're trying to get your attention. Another interpretation might be that it's an accident. They didn't intend to scratch you, as we see, in everyday life. That can potentially happen. Another interpretation could be that it's a demon. There's lots of different interpretations. It's the same example that I use with my students for poltergeist activity. If a china cup smashes to the ground in a poltergeist case, what is that? Is that a poltergeist? And your interpretation of that is that it's violent, it's aggressive, it's being destructive? Or is it a clumsy ghost that's just walked past a china cup and knocked it to the ground? You don't know. You don't know. The phenomena might be real, but your interpretation of that can vary. There can be so many different interpretations.
That's it. And you're now married. I'm married. You wake up in the morning and you've got a scratch. Yeah, okay. Did the wife scratch me in the middle of the night and she doesn't know about it? Or do we have a poltergeist sharing our room with us that we don't know about? And you've got to be really logical, like we mentioned earlier, and sort of like, okay, the chances are it was wifey. She got was having a bit of a dream, turned over and scratched her with her sharp nails. It's not going to be of a paranormal nature. And that's what that's a mentality that you've got to have nowadays, which is
Exactly.
a lot of people don't do that. So the fact that I follow you on social media, you're now married to Anna, you've got children. How do you manage to separate your normal university work life with your investigating and TV appearances, plus with your social life? Because you must be an extremely busy man. Does your
Yeah.
wife get involved with these investigations as well, or is she kind of like,
Well,
well,
the thing
you
is,
go and do your thing, Kieran?
yeah. Well, the fascinating thing is that my wife and I actually met on a ghost hunt. She was
Oh wow.
running a ghost hunt for a charitable organisation, and they were. She was looking for a celebrity to step in at the last moment, a ghost or paranormal celebrity, and the recommendation was for me, and I turned up, and that's it. We met, and here we are all these years later, married and have a family. So there's an equal fascination with the paranormal, and I
Right.
think what's lovely about our relationship is that I'm very much team skeptic and she's very much team believer in
Oh,
this, which
I
is
know where that's come from.
yes, a lovely dichotomy. But it kind of answers your point about being a busy man. We have fascinating conversations about some of the phenomena, even what we've just talked about in terms of exorcism, and that sort of thing. We've been talking about that quite a bit the last few weeks and our different views on that. Um, my university work, even though I'm involved in psychology, also involves parapsychology. I still do parapsychology research within a university setting. The ghost hunting stuff is separate to that, obviously, but it's part and parcel of, I think, getting a real sense of people's experiences and a real sense of haunted locations. So I think they very much kind of uh, support each other and kind of marry with each other in terms of those interests. So there is an overlap there, definitely, but also there's an overlap in terms of me being a parapsychologist, and a very public, very vocal side of that is talking about the skeptical explanations that I have on the various shows that I'm part of, which effectively is my
Yeah.
research. So it's not seen in any other way of that. But yeah, the whole family's fans of the paranormal too, so have a great time.
I can imagine. It's quite funny how uh, my wife, she loves watching all the shows, and I've interviewed Kate Sherrill, Barry Guy,
Oh yes,
and now yourself, to add to my celebrity list. And I love watching the shows that are on, and we both go, "Oh, there's a cryptid! Quick, set your camera to blurry." And stuff like
yeah,
that, because
yeah,
some of it is like it's painful to say, oh, this door just slammed, but you don't see what's behind the door.
yeah,
So you get all this TV that's giving us a bad name, but the work that you do and the work that the true groups do, I think kind of makes up for that,
yeah.
most definitely. So being of a scientific background for yourself, do you think there's ever going to be a time where we can prove or disprove the existence of the afterlife, spirits, or do you think it will always remain like personal belief and interpretation?
Um, I don't think we will. No, I don't think we will. And the reason why is because even if you were to find some way of definitively proving that it is, all the only thing you'd be definitively proving is that something paranormal is going on. So let me give you an example. If a medium is in a haunted location and communicates with a spirit, right, or sees an apparition in front of them, the number of supernatural explanations for what is happening is vast. It's not just that they might have seen an apparition. It might be that they've got a telepathic link with somebody in the afterlife. It's nothing about the spirit actually appearing in front of them. It might be that the spirit in the afterlife has projected clairvoyantly into their brain an image of themselves that they perceive then as being external. It might be that they have picked up on a historical kind of, ethereal record of that particular location, and therefore it's playing back like a stone tape theory, scenario, but it's in front of them. And that's what I mean. Even if you could find some definitive way to show that when people are looking at apparition, it is not psychology and it is not the environment, but it is something supernatural, I still don't think that there's any way that you can show what particular thing is going on in terms of a supernatural explanation. And let me throw in a caveat. At least I don't think that that's going to be possible in my lifetime. If I was able to predict, could it happen beyond my lifetime, then I think I would be a richer man than I am, because I would have the predictive capability to know what's going to happen in the future. And I just don't. But certainly in my lifetime, that will not happen. And I think just inherent in my answer is something that I think people should be very conscious of. That it's very, very easy to criticize a skeptic for having lots of different natural explanations for what goes on. But I could be equally critical of people who say that there is only one explanation for their ghostly experience, and that is, it is a ghost. The number of supernatural explanations is genuinely vast, and if anything, the list of supernatural explanations is longer than the list of natural explanations.
Yeah, and that's what makes it interesting and makes it fun, and give people like ourselves the chance to get our teeth into something that we are not 100% sure exactly what it is. And for people to say that ghosts and spirits and other entities don't exist, sort of like, you can't go down that road because there's so many things that happen. We get people's stories. I've given you a couple of stories. You've given me a couple of stories that we cannot explain. We do not have a rational explanation for them. But what we saw, what we heard, what we experienced has still happened. We just can't explain it. And
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. And it's the same as UFOs, or it's the same as cryptids. We see things. There may be a rational explanation, but there also may not be. And that's what makes this environment like one of the cool hobbies, rather than going out playing golf or something like that.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So, Cairan, I could absolutely speak to you all night. I know we've been talking for an hour. We've not even touched on like your TV shows, but what we could do a part 2 next year if you're more than happy to do
I'm
that.
happy to do a part 2 even later on this year, to be honest. I've thoroughly enjoyed the chat.
How about doing a Halloween special?
Yeah,
How
let's
does
do
that
it.
sound?
I would
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk offline when we're going to do that, because I have got quite a few episodes planned up until I think the end of September. You're going out next week. You heard it first here, because my special people go out. I kind of bump them to the front of the list. But what's next for Dr. Ciarán O'Keeffe?
Wow. Loads is happening. Yeah, we'll talk next time about some of the media projects, but and some of the listeners will know about Uncanny, the BBC show that I'm part of, and we're about to start a tour, an Uncanny tour that starts in 2 weeks, theatre tour, which
Nice.
goes around various theatres for about 6 months, various evenings, so that'll be fun. We are recording more episodes for Uncanny, which is kind of an exclusive, actually. We keep dropping hints now and then, but a lot of fans are saying, is there more Uncanny coming out? Well, yes, there is. We're doing recordings for some more episodes, both Halloween and Christmas episodes, so fingers crossed those will come together. And I'm doing lots of work at the moment looking at something called dimensional slips, which is very, very similar to magic flights, kind of, and time
If
slips
you're telling it,
thing.
don't tell me that, because I'm looking for somebody to come and talk to me about time slips. So we can talk about that next time as
Talk
well.
about that too.
Oh my God. See, you just creating extra episodes for me, Cairan. I thoroughly appreciate.
Brilliant.
Okay, my friend, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll talk offline when you're going to come back for part two. And I absolutely thank you for that because, like I say, there's so much stuff that we haven't covered. Will you stop being such a adventurous and busy person? Because it's giving me all this information that I can ask you about.
Brilliant. Well, no, we would just look forward to part two. I think that's the advantage, isn't it? So
That
yeah, no,
that sounds
it's been brilliant.
that would be great. Yeah, like I say, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I know it's getting late in your neck of the woods. It's almost bedtime, so you have a great what's left of your evening. Enjoy your wine, and no
Fabulous.
doubt we'll speak again soon.
Yes, look forward to it, Lee.
Okay,
Cheers. Bye bye.
take care. Thanks. Bye bye.